How did you come up with the name KaBOOM? What's the origin?
Well, the truth be told, I wanted to call the organization the Institute for Community Building.
Wake me up when that's over.
Very nonprofit-y. See, I was thinking about nonprofit, raise money.
Yeah,
kind of boring. And a kid kind of came up with the name KaBOOM. It's like an explosion of hope and opportunity. You know, it's like, oh, I get it. We had early employees who said, just answer the phone that way. I would answer the phone that way. And when you heard people's reaction to it, it was amazing. And mind you, that was before Google, that was before Yahoo. So it was a real big risk. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't a lot of creativity in names back in 1995 as there is now.
That's Daryl Hammond, founder of KaBOOM, a nonprofit dedicated to building playgrounds, mostly in tough and underserved neighborhoods. They build each playground in a single day using volunteers and funding from the community and corporations. It's probably the most fun volunteer event you'll ever attend. A long day of hard work, hauling mulch, mixing concrete, erecting swings and slides. But it's against the backdrop of blaring rock music, project managers dressed as bees and ballerinas, and all sorts of well-orchestrated shenanigans. Sort of like Habitat for Humanity meets Burning Man, minus the sex and drugs. Daryl and KaBOOM know that the business they're in is play.
I'm around the corner thinking of sweets. You're at the pub making up beats. When I hear the rhythm, I move from my feet. When I hear the rhythm, I move from my feet.
This is Crazy Good Turns. We tell stories about people who do amazing things for others. I'm your host, Brad Shaw. Today, we'll get to know Daryl Hammond and the nonprofit he founded in 1996, KaBOOM. It's one of the most successful nonprofits in the past 20 years. More than 3,000 playgrounds built across the country. KaBOOM got Daryl invited to the White House several times. He's built playgrounds with presidents and first ladies, NFL quarterbacks, rock stars, and thousands of everyday Americans giving a little of their time to make their community better. A couple points of trivia. KaBOOM was the first nonprofit to have its own ice cream flavor. Ben & Jerry's Caberry KaBOOM, and Ted Turner once tried to buy KaBOOM. Daryl politely declined. For someone who's spent pretty much his entire life making children smile and laugh, Daryl's own formative years were fraught with their own setbacks and tragedy. We'll get into that later, but one question we want to ask right off the bat is, why playgrounds? Are they really that important to communities? With all the other problems to solve and causes to promote in the world, can a jungle gym really make a difference?
Yeah, Fred Rogers used to say, play is the work of children. You know, by giving kids the opportunity to have an outlet. What happens in our society today is that we treat kids with toxic stress with play therapy instead of preventing toxic stress through unstructured, child-directed, child-initiated play in the first place. And playgrounds are indicator species to how we care about the future.
Let's talk about the S.J. Green Charter School for a minute in Orleans Parish. Failing for years even before Katrina, suffering from neighborhood apathy, anemic enrollment. 60% of the students had parole officers. Then, Katrina. The school flooded and Principal Tony Rakasner decided a KaBOOM playground was exactly the catalyst needed to recover from Katrina and the school's own past. Here's Tony.
You know, it was the beginning of really the rise of probably one of the nicest looking campuses in the city. The school is I think, 450 kids strong, kindergarten through 8th grade. I think at the time we built the playground, we probably had an enrollment of less than 150 kids because, again, it was very early in, people returning to the city. So the school is at maximum enrollment. It's doing extraordinarily well academically, and there is always a waiting list of kids to come to the school.
So if you had to wind back the clock, you'd say that building a playground there was really the impetus for the school's complete transformation.
I do. I think it symbolized the rebirth of the Orleans Parish public school system in its new form of charter schools, which now, we have more charter schools. 95% of kids who are enrolled in public schools in New Orleans now attend charter schools. And we believe that what we did at Green, in the way that the playground build, and the way that we brought community together in the broadest sense, really served as an example to the whole city of what a public education could look like, and the spirit of the broader community's interest in rebuilding a stronger and more successful public school system in the city.
Darrell Hammond was born in 1971, the youngest of 8 kids. His father was a truck driver, and one day he left on a drive and never came back, leaving Darrell's mother alone to care for the kids with no money or support. Darrell's mom, overwhelmed. Several nervous breakdowns, nowhere to turn. So she moved herself and her 8 kids into a group home outside Chicago. It's called Mooseheart, and Darrell's time there showed him both the power of charity and outdoor play.
So we took that opportunity, all 8 of us, to travel 3,500 miles to be raised on a 1,200-acre campus by the men and women of the Moose, this was their fraternal and benefit society where they paid 10 cents a day in what they called a big charity dollar to support this group home and seniors in Jackson, Florida.
When I was reading about it, there's a certain perception of a group home, but it really wasn't the way you grew up, and it wasn't a cartoon version of a group home. Can you just talk about sort of what the environment was like?
Yeah, 2 things that always struck me was, one, these people who sent 10 cents a day, $35 a year, and millions of it did it, which brought us through high school and college and anything that was kind of at our footprint. But it was a 1,200-acre campus, and it was absolutely beautiful. We had a 300-acre man-made lake that we were able to fish on in the summer, ice fish on in the winter, ice skate on, and it was bucolic. It was really nice. So it wasn't the type of kind of orphanage that you mentally bring up a picture.
Did you have a playground there?
We had a great playground there.
What was it like? Describe it.
Yeah, so the playground there was, interestingly, the playgrounds we built today are what's called connected post and platforms. The playground that I had at Mooseheart was all independent play structures. So we literally had a fun house. And it was like a little house, and inside was a rotating cylinder that you would get in and run on like a hamster wheel. And certainly you can get one person doing it well, but you get a couple of people in there and it could get pretty scary. You sometimes lay down on it and try to make the whole rotation. You try to go forward and backwards on it. So, the playground I had, I remember both, it was a great time to connect competitively with the other guys that I was growing up with to see who was the king of the hill. And yet at the same time, it was also a great outlet when things just felt like it sucked to go over there and be in my own world.
More challenges awaited Darrell. After leaving Mooseheart, he went to community college but dropped out. The lack of structure, he says, wasn't suited to his personality. Then he went to Ripon, a 4-year liberal arts school in Wisconsin. Worked in a rivet factory to help pay his way, but the debts just piled up and the thought of graduation just slipped away. Then something happened. Something that rattled any foundation he thought he had at 21. Speaking of that point in your life, you had a tragic incident occur that was life-changing for you, and that was the death of your sister, Kitty. Can you talk about that and sort of what happened and how it played into how you think about things now?
Yeah, so my sister Kitty was the oldest of the ones that actually graduated college. So she was kind of an icon to me and a mentor, because she wasn't the oldest of the siblings. She was actually the 6th. So there were others above her that went to college, dropped out, and didn't finish. She was the first to finish. And then she went into the military and was having a great career. But she also struggled, and I think both with mental health issues and others. And we had gotten a tragic call that she had passed away, and we didn't know much about it, and got down to Oklahoma where she was living and realized that both her and her husband had passed away. And what all the evidence was, unfortunately, had pointed to was a murder-suicide. It also pointed to the fact that my sister had actually killed her husband and then killed herself. It's a dark period. There's no doubt about it.
No college education, no strong family roots, no real identity. Darrell decided to start from scratch and rebuild his life, with purpose, but it wasn't a straight path. In the spring of 1993, he took part in an urban studies fellowship run by Northwestern University. The pay wasn't good, and he still had debts to pay. He stayed in a 40-story public housing building in Chicago with little income, living on cheap hamburger meat and Velveeta cheese. But here, Darrell learned the philosophy of asset-based community building, helping struggling communities focus on what they have versus what they need. The fellowship ended in the spring of 1994, and he took a job with City Year, to open the volunteer group's Chicago office. Early on, Daryl was tasked with organizing a large service project for City Year's first national meeting, and he decided to build 2 playgrounds. Endured all kinds of headaches along the way: funding, logistics, cranky partners, but he figured it all out, and the project was a huge success. The next year, Daryl left City Year and brought his newfound playground skills as a contractor to another volunteer group in Washington, D.C., and a housing project called Livingston Manor. It seems like the Livingston Manor playground build early on was sort of a turning point for you guys. And there was also sort of a tragic event in the community tied to it that I think was sort of catalyzing. Can you talk about that build and kind of what it did?
I'd moved to Washington, D.C. after finishing up my City Year service in Columbus and then going back to Chicago, and had gotten asked to come do a project for another conference Youth Service America was putting on in Washington, D.C. Same kind of similar situation. They wanted all the conference participants to come to one site and have this kind of transformative gut experience and do it together, this kind of better together type of experience. Tough neighborhood in Washington, D.C. It's in the shadows of the Capitol, 3 miles from the Capitol. And a lot of those kids had actually never been outside of their neighborhood, let alone to where the Capitol sits. And while building that playground, I had met a young girl called Ashley, and she was 8 years old, and she wanted to be involved so badly. And I didn't know what she was doing, but she was collecting pennies at school. And one day she came up to me with a jar of pennies, and it was like, it was only like 80 cents. But it was the effort that she put into it that we then knew that we had to shine a light on her as a positive example of any effort was better than no effort whatsoever.
And was she collecting money to build a playground?
She was collecting money to build a playground.
Wow.
And had actually, long before I showed up, had a design of a playground on her refrigerator that she showed me. And while we were doing that, ironically, there was an article in the Washington Post about 2 young kids, Aisha and Clendon, who were 2 and 4 years old in the heat wave of 1995 in Washington, D.C., who had crawled into an abandoned Trans Am in Washington, D.C., and suffocated and died. The reaction to it was finger pointing. The mayor pointed the finger at the housing department. The housing department pointed the finger at the rec department, and nobody was going to take responsibility. And a Washington Post reporter had seen a small blurb in the Metro section about this happening. And so she decided to go down, and literally took weeks and went 3 miles to say if they hadn't crawled into this car, where would they have played? No swimming pool, no basketball courts. She found the first one about 3 miles away. And she wrote this article that appeared on the front page of the Washington Post about what was happening in our urban decaying communities across the country called No Place to Play. I had built 2 playgrounds was building my second playground, and I saw this kind of article that I had nothing to do with, but it gave me a different perspective on the sense of purpose, that it was more than about the playground we were building. It was about the process by how we were building it that could really help heal communities if we could get them to invest in themselves.
The Livingston Manor playground build got a lot of national press. Companies started calling Daryl, asking for similar volunteer projects for their employees. KaBOOM was born, and it took off. 3,000 playgrounds later, KaBOOM is stronger than ever, creating lasting impact, great and small, in communities all across the country. Most of your playgrounds were built in tough, underserved communities, which you would think over time, vandalism and other things can happen. What is the sort of state of play, per se, with playgrounds built in those kind of communities? Does the community take care of them? Describe kind of that.
Yeah, certainly more times than not, because they're invested, because they actually help build them, they maintain them. Yeah. There's no doubt that some of the playgrounds get vandalized, and it's unfortunate. But I always talk about Juanita Hatton, who was in nice town of Philadelphia, and she was an hourly chambermaid at a hotel downtown, and she would leave for work at 4 o'clock in the morning. And one morning after the playground was open for 3 weeks, she saw graffiti on it. And she was in this fit of panic, actually, and didn't know what to do. She decided to take the day off and go scrub the graffiti off. I talked to her later about this, and she said, I didn't want the kids to come home from school and see something that their parents had built with graffiti on it. That happened in Nicetown over 2 or 3 months period of time. Every day, she would just give up her day's pay and scrub the graffiti off it. And she said, I'm going to wear whoever's doing this down.
Did she win?
And she won. And a couple of years ago, it's been a couple of years now, I was at their 15th anniversary. And the most amazing thing is they built benches around the trees that we had planted that now are providing shade. And so if you think about when we plant some of these trees or a playground, and we say, what is this really going to come? And then return 15 years later and to be able to sit under it because it's providing shade to the playground, that's the type of real impact that we can have here.
Full disclosure here. I served on KaBOOM's board for a number of years and consider Daryl a good friend, having spent hours together mixing concrete on playground builds all over the country. Right around the time of our interview earlier this year, Daryl stepped down as CEO to join his wife Kate in Albania. She's taken on a new job as country director for Peace Corps there. Kate ran operations for KaBOOM for 14 years. Daryl credits her with much of its success. It's time to let her career take the lead in their lives and also give KaBOOM the chance to grow without him. KaBOOM has definitely grown up after Daryl's 20 years of leadership. The good news is, he hasn't. When was the last time you were on a swing?
About 3 hours ago, I was at East Lake Park, which you helped me build.
I did, actually. I was wondering about that.
So I stopped over at East Lake Park on between meetings today and sat out on the swing on that park, and because it was a beautiful day here in Atlanta, and both took a lot of pride in what we accomplished, and I watched the ripples that happened in that community, the market, the farmers market that's now there, and the housing stock that has changed, but still not gentrified, but has the same residents that were living in it. Because it was during the school day, there wasn't a lot of kids or a lot of people are about, but I could imagine myself having conversations about asking people how this got here and them regaling stories about this was built by volunteers. I helped build this.
I'm Brad Shaw, and thanks for listening to this episode of Crazy Good Turns. Go to crazygoodturns.org to learn more about KaBOOM and submit your ideas for extraordinary people and organizations we should feature. You might have noticed we found some great music to support our podcast, and we've provided a Spotify playlist of the full tracks on our website so you can take a longer listen, which we hope you'll do. And if you're a band with a song we should consider featuring, you can submit it on our website too. Crazy Good Turns is audio engineered by Stephen Key. Music supervision and mixing by Score in Los Angeles. And a special thanks to Megan Basinger. We hope you like our podcast and help us out by sharing us in your social networks and giving us a review on iTunes. Take care and let's connect again soon.